This is the Final Round Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. And now your host, Chris Marquardt. And good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the first edition of the Final Round Podcast. We had all sorts of these grand plans of how things were going to work out tonight. At this point, none of them so far coming to light, but nonetheless, we are going to press on Jason Oldfield, who is going to be our co-host for the evening, celebrating his birthday tonight, and John Pelican. We expect to see him in on the next one. Nonetheless, this is going to be a very, very fun debut. We've got Pat Budd, who's going to be joining us here in just a few minutes, and we'll be talking with him about all sorts of things drag racing. He spent some time down in Florida, won a bunch of races with Sam Gaudier, spent some time with a local star. We'll be getting into some of that information. And then on the back half of the show, we're going to be talking with Jordan Rutherford, who's a guy out of Ohio who's getting ready to climb back into a rail car again this weekend. And he's got a Nova that he wants to talk a little bit about. And I'm dying to learn a little bit more about the Nova myself, because this is a guy that I came to know through RC cars. So he put on the controller, grabbed the steering wheel, and he's got a pretty good little hobby going for himself out there in Ohio. But this is the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast. We're on Finger Lakes 1. It's going to be every other week from now until antiquity, or we get bored of doing it. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to getting into a little bit with the Western New York Super Rod Association, some of their stuff that's coming up, and I know they've also already got some plans on getting out to Empire Dragway and doing some material live from the racetracks, which is going to be a lot of fun. So a lot of stuff coming as we turn our Thursday night motorsports focus to drag racing every other week, opposite the 31st lap, which is focused primarily on dirt track racing. Seems like now would be a great time to jump into the conversation with our first guest tonight, Pat Budd. Pat, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot. It's neat. Jason gave me a call and asked to get involved, and it sounds like fun.
Well, just the little bit that we were talking in pre-race or pre-race in the pre-show conversation, you've got quite the mind, and we mentioned that gentleman from in Macedon. He's the 470 champion this year, Dan Germano. You spent a little bit of time with his car, and you said it was basically just common sense changes, but you're able to take a second and a half off his car. It seems like a huge jump over the course of only a quarter mile.
It was a challenge, and to be perfectly honest, it was a lot of fun because some of the equipment that he had, the chassis and things like that, were a little bit older, and he had some ideas that he wanted to go a little quicker, and we never expected to end up where we're at.
Right.
But it was he had a little nitrous oxide kit, and they had a torque converter that was too loose, and you do some of the basics, and they picked up a bit, and then, nitrous oxide is a little bit like heroin. So they asked me to come along and help tune their stuff, and through the course of all that, his son Adam has really taken an interest in the tuning and breaking down the data and looking at the things the run teaches you, and just continuing at us, adding nitrous oxide and taking the precautions with the tune-up to make sure you don't hurt anything.
And the conversation that we had right off the bat when we first started talking before the show started was how you can make a motor run for a long time on nitrous oxide and not have to do the repetitive rebuilds, and it really caught me by surprise. I just sort of assumed, as I think probably many people did, their reference is the frequent engine explosions that you see in the NHRA's top three divisions that we see on television on a regular basis. Now they're always tearing motors down and building them back up. And you said it doesn't necessarily have to live that way for the drag racer at the regional level.
No, most of the stuff you're going to see as far as hood scoop explosions and whatnot are ignition related.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's where you put the timing at the launch of the car, if you retarded it too much trying to help the car to get off the starting line, or if you have something like a rotor or something of that nature go bad. Now, what makes them not so scary, honestly, is usually the butterflies on the carburetor are wide open. So when that backfire happens, it comes right up through the carbs, and 5 times out of 10, you really won't have any real damage. Wow. As far as the inside of the engine goes, I'm long-winded. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Not a problem.
When you introduce something to create more power, all you're really trying to do is create more heat over the top of the piston so it turns the crank over.
Right.
When you add an oxidizer, everything happens a little quicker. Think of an oxyacetylene torch, cutting torch. That when you don't have enough oxygen, the flames kind of whipping all over the place and acting stupid. But when you add the oxygen, it becomes a tighter kernel.
Right.
When you're playing with nitrous oxide, you're looking for that tight kernel, and when you get it, you just back the timing off so the faster flame front isn't causing detonation, and just keep playing with that oxygen and nitrous oxide relationship. And if you follow basic rules and learn how to read a spark plug, it's not uncommon for a guy to spray 500 horsepower total between two systems on a 632 and put over 100 runs on it in a year.
Wow. I mean, that's it's all in taking care of it. Is it one of those things where you get out of it what you put in? You know, all about maintenance and knowing what you're doing so that you don't just go stoke it till she blows?
Yeah, one of the smartest things they did, and I hope this doesn't come off too arrogant, is they hired somebody that had been there.
Sure.
And it isn't so much about, getting welded to the hip with your tuner so you can't do anything without him. It's more about having somebody break down a lot of the myths and the fallacies, Mm-hmm. You do have to run a much tighter torque converter because, in reality, your engine now thinks it's 300 cubic inches bigger. So as soon as you break down to more, common sense terms like that, it becomes a little bit easier to wrap your head around.
In terms of the 470 itself, the 470 is much the same as the 990 that we've talked about with Jason
Mm-hmm.
Moldfield and John Pelicane on one of the previous episodes of the 31st lap, and your goal is to run as close to that 470 number as possible.
Right.
And when you're talking about this kind of power, how much of it is in the driver's hands and how much of it is now in the technology itself in terms of controlling when your spark is, how fast your fuel gets delivered, and things along those lines? Because it just seems like you've got so much raw power in there and you're doing it in such a short amount of time that it's over as soon as it starts.
Well, we're constantly putting different tune-ups in the car as far as the nitrous fuel jets and the timing. Through the course of the summer into the fall, the car started to like life a little bit better, and we were working harder on the suspension and tires and things like that than we were on the engine, so we were able to walk our way to the behind the firewall, which is always nice. So the point I'm getting at is the tune-ups vary from, oh my God, we got to qualify for this and we've got to go, way sub 470, or is it about trying to run dead on? And smaller and smaller pills go in, and in my estimation, the goal is to have a car set up to run a 468 flat out, and then use a little bit of timing and a little bit of ballast to bring the car back to your 471 that you're looking for,
right?
And play from there.
So that's how fine the line is. As we're talking about spans of 2 300ths of a second.
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy. But what's neat is once you get up to that power level, now the car we're talking about, the Germanos cars, is actually pretty unique in that it still has steel roof and quarters. I mean, it's heavy. Mm-hmm. But once you get looking for that consistency, there's enough power there that you have to make a fairly coarse move to affect it. In other words, if you're going 12 flat, 20 horse is going to show up on your time slip. Mm-hmm. You're going 470s, 20 horses not going to show up on your time slip. So in a way, you do have a window.
Gotcha. You made reference to the equipment being a little aged when you first came to the car. Maybe that's even understating it. In terms of some of the people out our way that are accustomed to the dirt track stuff, the technology and the specs haven't changed a whole lot since the 80s per se. A lot of the cars have evolved to be almost cookie cutter side by side. And you can put the new shock mounts and things like that on an older car and use it for sportsman applications or what have you. So you still might see a 2004, 2005, or older yet car kicking around in particular instances. You made reference a little bit to the shock package and how important it is to be able to get the wheel bounce out so that you can hook it up and get the car to go down the track, and you can count on that part of the consistency as well. In terms of old, what's old mean? What's old mean, and how much life does a car have to give? I mean, I can't believe that we're talking about speeds like this with steel roof and quarters.
Well, the chassis itself, by my best estimation, was built in the late 80s.
Wow.
Now, what negative that isn't profound. It's a lot like what you're talking about with the round-around cars. But things like bracketry, shock location, things of that nature. You're a lot more limited as far as what you can do in the back of the car compared to what you might have even on a 15-year-old car.
Mm-hmm.
And as you work and you try to fine-tune things like that, it becomes a little bit more difficult. The other thing that you run into is, I'm sure similar with your roundy-round guys, center of gravity's big, so engine height might be a little higher, so you got to play with the struts to try to make sure they open as slow as possible so the car doesn't pitch rotate too fast. Things of that nature. And if you keep looking at the car from say, harmonic balancer to ring gear and not as a series of components, it all starts to make sense pretty quick.
Right. In terms of age, metal seems to want to wear out. So, I mean, you've got flex in there from left to right in drag racing, and then you've also got flex in, as the car's coming down, so you got the flex in the middle. Does it seem like the older a car is, the more flex you've got, and how scary is the word flex when it comes to running a 470 class?
Well, there's two different things there. First of all, flex in the chassis when you're running 470 makes it harder to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the track's really, really good, it's going to pull and tug on that rear tire differently, and it's going to kind of move things around. There is a misnomer where cars wear out,
mm-hmm.
and if you look at one of the things that's unique to drag racing is they use 4130 alloy.
Mm-hmm.
It's thinner, but it's a lot more brittle. It's got more carbon in it than mild steel does. And when you weld it, it draws the carbon to the weld, which does what they call embrittle it. However, if you look at the wings on an aircraft,
mm-hmm.
even an experimental aircraft, and how they flop and they move and they do all this stuff during the course of a flight, if that stuff's not fatiguing, you're not going to lose a race car in 20, 25 years. You might lose its usability because things in power have moved past it, but a car stays good.
I've sat on the wing of planes and watched them do that and wondered about exactly the point that you were just making.
Yeah.
About why is it?
I mean, it's to me, it's keep it simple, stupid. I mean, if a car's got the pipe in the right spot and it lends itself to an easy update. In other words, it was built correctly in the first place, but people learned how to make stuff better since.
Mm-hmm.
As long as that car will accept that update, as long as the rest of the bracketry doesn't make you put a weird four-link tune up in it or whatever, you're good.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about some of the background. We touched on it a little bit. You were running a lot with Sam Gaudiers, and after working with IHRA as a chassis inspector, you worked on a couple of the program updates there, and then you started winning some stuff with some of the heavier cars, winning a couple times in Orlando. I've got a bunch of questions for you comparing where we are up here in New York compared to tuning a car down in Orlando. But just tell me a little bit about what it was like winning that event 3 times down there.
We built the car in 2005. Back then, you had to weigh 3,500 pounds. He had a 707 cubic inch big block Chevy on nitrous. When we went out, it ran okay. It ran low sevens, but the engine was a popcorn popper. And what I mean by that is the combustion chamber and just the overall design of the engine just wanted to detonate
mm-hmm.
without nitrous because it didn't control the flow of the fuel well between the ports and the runners and this, that, and the other. So he got that fixed, and it became a 762, and we got pretty aggressive with it, and we won a best 8th mile ET 441, and won a championship down in Maryland. They had a big tire shootout, and then we won Shakedown twice in a row. I think we were the only pro team to win that event 2 years consecutive.
Wow.
And then we won the thing in Orlando 3 times and had a runner-up in the middle of all that. And it was one of those things that was like a fairy tale. You know what I mean? We built the car for the guy, we went out and tuned it for the guy, and the guy won. And it was a good time. And we developed a pretty special friendship over the car. It's really, who wants a big tire back half car nowadays? But the things that this thing does, it's got a new Brad Anderson Stage 6 Hemi in it. Definitely stay tuned. I think this thing will go 225 with a stock body roof. Steel roof, steel quarter. The thing's got the original vinyl roof on it. It's just goofy stuff like that really flips the trigger,
Right. I mean, you said over 700 cubic inches?
Yeah, the last engine was a 762, and we used to fire 3 stages of nitrous into it. It was digitally fuel injected. which made it suck, honestly. But it was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun to learn.
Now, when you have an engine of that size, you got to be just pouring fuel through it just to get the cylinder full so that it'll combust.
Yeah, they're hungry. They are, and after a while, after a certain size and different injectors, you actually start running a belt-driven fuel pump. But nitrous enrichment isn't really. I mean, it's a big deal, but really, it's getting the fuel through the main fuel system. If you're running carburetors, the last thing you want to do is dry out those float bowls. Same as any other application. In
terms of an engine that size, and you said it tended to want to be a popcorn popper, to use your words, it tended to lend itself to detonating because of the way that the fuel was done. Was it just a case where the motor was so big that you couldn't get the flow the way that you wanted it to, or was there just a better way to do it?
It was something stupider than that. The engine was built out of a Sonny Leonard block. It was intended to only be used with a specific Sonny Leonard cylinder head.
Mm-hmm.
That cylinder head was designed for IHRA Pro Stock.
Okay.
When you have a cylinder head that's engineered to be such specific, naturally aspirated, blah 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 blah, they really don't like fuel. They don't accept all that extra fuel the nitrous oxide system throws down there. So it tends to run against the side of the runner and this, that, and the other. So what was done is the combustion chambers were opened up and laid back and slowed everything down, and that let us run it pretty healthy on 2. When we lit the third, we knew we had a fuse on it. And hopefully it was long enough. If it was the final round, we didn't care. But, that thing didn't like itself very much. But compared to a lot of other engines, including Germano 638, that thing's got such a wide window that damn near a beginner could throw 700 horse at it. It's really a good engine. It was built by PAR, Scott Duggan's shop.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as size, they don't know they're big.
Right.
Like, you're just using bigger numbers. It's really kind of the same deal. You might have to use more starting line retard to hook it, but it doesn't know.
Well, there's got to be some degree, though, that you have to respect the size of it because of what you've got. Is this? I guess let's start a different way. Is it something where somebody took a 454 and just started boring holes and putting different strokes and stuff in it and different engine components?
Good question. That's a really good question.
To build it, or was it a different block?
A stock big block Chevrolet, the center line of the two of the bores, any two, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're on the same bank, is 4.84 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as these engines started getting bigger, they start spreading those cylinders out. It went from 4840 to 4900.
Mm-hmm.
And then from 4900, they started building what they called 5-inch motors. Those are 5-inch bore spacing.
Okay.
And that's as big as they could go using things like standard width. The distance from the mid plate to the motor plate, all that stuff stayed the same up to that point.
Uh-huh.
And then once they became what they call a 5200 engine or a 5300 engine, they became physically larger.
Gotcha.
The whole point with those things and their deck height is to allow a massive amount of stroke.
Right.
The bore does get bigger when you spread those bore centers out because it leaves more room for a hole. But that's as much about stabilizing things and keeping it rigid as it is about more inches. The
Sure.
cubic inches come from the stroke. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Because, just in my mind is you can only make a cylinder itself so big before you start compromising flow for water and the thickness of the cylinder wall itself, and then you put any major heat in there. If the wall's thinned out too much, it's just going to crack every time.
Plus, it's a 2-valve engine, so it's the air fuel is entering the port from one side. As say a Honda or Mitsubishi engine that's a 4-valve per cylinder, pretty much anybody's nowadays. But because it's a 2-valve deal, controlling the fuel is a little different. And the bigger you make the bore, consequently, the farther the flame has to travel.
Sure.
But it is more about block integrity. That's why you never see anything bigger than a 638 built out of a 4840 Chevy engine, because you just start pushing the sleeves. They're just too thin.
Right. In terms of the big tire divisions, were those running on a particular target time too? I heard a couple different numbers in there that sounded like we were running the same idea as a 470 or 990, where you're trying to target a particular ET. Is that it, or was it just running first as?
It was
first
heads up. It was heads up. We were burning stuff up on purpose. I can't even lie. We tell you an old hero war story. We were at Englishtown, and I had to get home, and it was shakedown. And I said to him, here's a guy you got in the next round. This tune-up probably has a 600-foot fuse. It's a 660-foot track. We had the third system lit, and sure as shies, at 650 feet, the hood scoop went in the air, but he won the round. So heads-up racing is a little bit different. It's a little bit higher budget because you have to accept to break parts because you're always trying to push and become a little quicker, right?
Right.
With the index racing, that takes that away.
Mm-hmm.
So you still got to run fast, and you still get the thrill of running fast, but you don't have to burn your junk up just to go another round to get the points.
The heads-up racing, it always strikes me that's more cavalier. You know,
that's what makes it fun, dude.
Right. Nobody.
Two go down, one come back, right? It's the macho. It's just two gunfighters.
Sure.
Two go down, one come back. One guy's dead. He's gone. Put your junk in the trailer. The other guy's, pumping his fist. There's no other kind of motorsports that's that decisive, that quick.
Is there an affordable heads-up type of racing at this point where the sport is?
No. The words heads up and affordable are completely. For example, stock engines. Stockers.
Mm-hmm.
The little tire 9-inch things. They run NHRA, and it's usually a bracket race, unless they run the same two cars from the same class, then they run heads up. Those stock engines that are supposed to use stock piston, stock this, stock the other, they've got crazy stuff like what's called launcher cams, where the lobe is thrown off the cam, and the cam is designed to catch the lifter, gather it in, and bring it back down the lobe. All that's just to get extra lift. It's brutal on valve train, and these are in stockers.
Right.
No, if one guy is going to line up next to you and it's between you and him first to the finish line, there's always some guy that's going to spend more than you. There was a dude that was running one of these street legal classes in NSCA that had come off a championship season in pro stock truck. He decided to take it easy and go streetcar racing.
Yeah.
The competition's always stupid. You heard my voice. I talk fast. I haven't got talking faster. It's exciting to me. I love it.
How'd you get into it? How did the drag racing? There's so many different avenues into the sport because there's so many different divisions that had really sort of taken hold as bracket racing became more and more popular, as NHRA evolved through the 70s and 80s, and there's so many different avenues in. How did you get into it?
Street racing. I can't lie to you. I had an old car that had a small block in it and it went a lot better than it looked, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I used to get a few races here and there locally, and Mount Reed Boulevard was always the place to do it.
Right.
And then we would start going to the drag strip with our street tires on, with our mufflers on, to test. And we would enter a bracket class. We didn't care if we lost first round because to us it was just testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of a sudden, out came this new high-energy form of drag racing in the early, mid-'90s, where people were doing what we were doing against each other on a drag strip, and you were getting all the best guys from the country touching one off against each other. Well, I needed to be part of that. And when we really started getting serious with it, I didn't have the money by a long shot to buy anything store-bought, as they say.
Right. So
a very good friend of mine, Randy Jewell, he's from Rochester as well. The two of us partnered up on putting a car together. The partnership was I paid the bills and he welded. And it was cool. And then we sold that car and moved up to a car that was closer to a Pro Modified, and we raced a little Top Sportsman, but that's when we got hooked on 6-second, 200-mile-an-hour heads-up stuff in the late 90s, and it just went from there. We opened up a chassis shop to share what we learned, built a few cars that won a few championships, and the economy aided in 2007. So we moved forward.
Can you even focus on
There's your long-winded answer.
It lends itself to so many other questions. First, I haven't actually asked anybody this. Can you even focus on anything at 200 miles an hour?
Yeah, everything slows down. if you watch football, you hear an expression that a young quarterback needs the game to slow down.
Right.
It's the same thing in a race car. You go from, I can describe it as driving for something that already happened, like correcting, like for something you actually feel in your hips, to when things slow down, you're correcting well in advance, and you can actually see if your girlfriend's standing there by the finish line.
Really?
I mean, things do slow down. You start to feel it. You start to steer almost with body language, and it becomes a lot easier to not overreact and not jerk the wheel.
So, what was this car that you were racing on Mount Reed Boulevard?
The first one was a 1977 Chevrolet Impala two-door.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fugly. It ran, low 12s on a little L60 street tire. It was kind of a sleeper. Mm-hmm. And then from there we went to a back half Firebird, and then made that a chassis car, and kind of just kept moving up the streetcar ranks.
Either of those two still around?
It's funny. The last I saw the Firebird was in Florida for sale. I had no idea where the Impala wound up, and the Vet that we built, the 2000 Corvette tube chassis car, mm-hmm. That got sold to a guy in Athens, Greece, and he barrel rolled it at 190 at Santa Pod in England.
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, he walked away. It was really cool. As a matter of fact, if you ever get really, really bored, and you got to be really, really bored, there's a web or drag site called dragster.eu, and it's the big European thing. And they wrote a nice write-up about how the car's fire suppression system worked perfect, and it made us feel good. It made us sound like we were a big-time American business, which we were the last thing.
Right. This is the C5 Corvette, right?
Yeah, it was a C5.
And that the barrel roll do that one in?
Yeah, I think he was the first 6-second car in Greece with that thing. And then he started racing around the continent, and I lost track a little bit. The guy's name is Philippus Papaphilippou, and he currently races Top Fuel motorcycle over there.
Really? The motorcycle, I think all the drag racing guys are crazy, but some of my hobbies, they think I'm crazy, so it's a fair trade-off. Just to be going that fast in that short amount of time it's spectacular.
Let me put it in perspective. Say a car that's going 680s, which nowadays really isn't that fast. It's fast, but it's not uncommon. Right. You're going 0 to 70 in a second flat.
Uh-huh.
From the hit. So, I mean, it's really, really hard to replace that kind of a feeling with any other in motorsports. Plus, you're sitting there in the stupid thing while it's idling, waiting to do your water burnout, and then backing up, and all you're thinking about is, holy crap, I've got 1,000 horse of nitrous oxide flowing through this thing.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it gives you some really neat, thrill, for lack of it. It's like sitting in a roller coaster going up the hill just waiting. It's
right.
Awesome. And
then you take it and you do what Philippou's doing on the Top Fuel drag, or the Top Fuel bike.
He just hates himself, I think.
Yeah,
I really do. I think that someone really treated him wrong as an infant.
Let me just 2 wheels, and the only thing that's between you and the concrete at 200 miles an hour is a little bit of leather.
Yeah, and that is it. And without going way off topic, just fun factoid. He bought Adi's old Vet driven by Fred Hahn. He bought a whole bunch of Corvette Pro Mods over the course of 4 or 5 years. His family's in somehow some kind of a huge oil shipping magnet or something like that. So funding isn't a real big problem. Neat guy though. I mean, he wants to kill himself, I guess, but he's fun.
Everybody's got to have a hobby, right?
Yeah.
What have you got planned for the off season? What are we working on this winter before we get into next spring?
Well, Sam's program is pretty offbeat, and I'll be the first one to admit that, there's not a ton of places to race. Mm-hmm. We do get some exposure for it, which is kind of fun because it's such a unique car. But I want to get a lot better at tuning a Ruth's blown, alcohol Hemi type thing. And I understand some of the basics, but it's going to be a matter of tearing into his program and trying to shove this thing. I'd like to go 4.0 in the 8th with it.
Yeah.
It's not bad at 3,200 pounds. So we'll see. It's a challenge. It's like everything else. If it was
That's a big girl going that fast.
What's that?
That's a big girl going that fast.
He's just like ice in his veins. He's a really nice guy, but when he flips his visor down, he's very constant, very driven, very focused. He's the kind of guy that you really don't mind putting a lot of hours in because you know that he's not going to let you down when the tree comes down. And
he came away with the championship this year in the 470 ranks. He's where it's at this year.
I'm sorry, say it again.
He won the championship this year in 470, right?
Who, Germano?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about Gaudier. The winner with Germano is going to be pretty much just, kind of touch it up. It's not really going to have any complete changes. Where Sammy just went out testing in his Chevelle, and he had problems with his fuel cell, for example. It leaked on the hit, so that was not good. But I think most of the winter is going to be dedicated to just trying to wrap my head around his program and come out screaming next year. I think Dan's set.
Yeah.
It's just for him a matter of rubbing on it and making it shinier.
Right. So in terms of this Hemi deal, this seems like it's a pretty big change.
Oh, it's huge because nitrous oxide's harder. I mean, I don't want to put anybody down with the blower thing, but it's mechanical fuel injection. It's very linear, number-driven type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's easier to get on your 2 feet, but it's harder to become probably equally hard to become very, very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But it all goes back to what we were talking about before your show. It's air fuel spark. It doesn't matter what the power header is. You just got to observe the flame front and how fast it's going.
I'm just excited at the simple thought of a Hemi being stuffed into a Chevelle.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's got the stock front suspension stubs in it because of the rules. These outlaw rules say you have to have a stock front suspension.
Uh-huh.
From there back, it's a double frame rail Pro Mod. And the other thing he wants to do with it is, have you heard at all about this drag radial silliness?
No, not that.
All right, this will get your attention.
Okay.
There's these guys out there in these 3,000-pound cars, Mustangs, Firebirds, whatever, stock wheelbase, going. The guy just went 590 in the quarter mile at 251 miles an hour on a drag slick that is like an N50. Remember back in the day, you'd go to Western Auto, get an N50.
You go on.
It's like an L60, just bigger. It's a 315 millimeter wide drag radial. They're going 380s in the eighth on a radial. It's ludicrous. We'd like to try and get a piece of that, but it goes back to heads up. Mm-hmm. There's never cheap heads up racing. These things you build 4,000 horse and get a good traction control system.
I had swimming a little bit here, so.
Yeah, because I keep up bringing up 40 items in one sentence.
Well, I mean, on the radial thing, we got again. We're going to be catching up with Jordan Rutherford here in a little bit. Who's talking about getting into a rail car again for the first time in who knows how long, as he's running down in Kentucky this weekend. Right. But the radial thing, it doesn't strike me that that's lending itself real well for grip, but they're certainly figuring something out.
You got to dead hook it, and then you got to walk it out of the starting line. But these things are 60 foot and 1.0, and for the drag racers out there, they know that that's typically a solid 680 type of a 60 foot time, and then they use the ridiculous power they have from the 60 foot clocks on, and they just motor, and they do it without wheelie bars, and it's just a fad, not a fad, but it's a movement we think that is going to try to prop up the sport. The other neat thing is something called no prep. That's where you go to a drag strip and they scrape all the prep, all the glue off everything off the starting line, and you race on bare asphalt.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd like to take this Chevelle and do that too.
That
only 2,600 horsepower.
That's all. That's all. I mean, you've got. How are you hooking up then? I mean,
it's just a matter of managing what's called wheel speed. With most slicks, like a big slick, you don't want to dead hook it because it'll deform the slick, and then you get something called tire shake, and it's bad. But you want to actually what they call get up on the tire. So you want the tire to rotate slightly faster than the car is actually moving forward. Mm-hmm. So think of it as a controlled spin.
Right.
Radials hate that stuff.
Well, I mean,
so with a big tire car, it's a little bit easier to get down sketchy surfaces because they actually want to be kind of slipping anyway.
Well, you've also got this weird thing where you gotta rethink all your gearing too to make sure that your wheel speed isn't traveling faster than the car, too much faster than the car is, because at that point now you're just blowing all your traction and you're going to get left in the dark. But there's nothing for it to hook to. You're just relying on, in some of these cases you're relying on that tire just to grab against asphalt.
We gag a bunch of timing out of this thing at the hit. So when he lets go of his trans brake, it pulls 6 degrees right away.
Right.
And then it holds it out for a period of time, and that's to help settle the thing down. There's traction control available to us. We haven't gotten that far, where you analyze the speed that the drive shaft is accelerating,
mm-hmm.
and the computer looks at the speed that the crankshaft's accelerating,
mm-hmm.
and it uses those two numbers to control the rate of acceleration from the engine. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But you got to learn how to use all those toys. Just because they're there doesn't mean that they work.
What brought this fad on in terms of the radial side of things? Is it just people that want to get back to the more purist type of street racing?
Yes. Everybody got sick of pro mods, basically. I mean, everything's cyclical. It's just like music,
Sure.
You went from Poison to Nirvana. People just got sick of one and went to the other.
Right.
People got sick and tired of looking at pro stockers and pro mods and these big tire cars that I love. Let's get that out there. They're 4 inches off the track going straight as an arrow. It just gets old.
Right.
So then they went on to this 10.5 slick thing, and those cars became like pro stockers. And then they moved on to drag radial, and now they actually have a class for drag radial for even smaller tires. And it's just people trying to bring it back to the purest level with excitement and show that they can handle a very difficult situation in terms of traction better than their competitor. But you almost got to call BS, because when you legitimately have 4,000 horse turbo motors, you can get a 112 60-foot and still manage to go a 620. You know what I mean?
Right. The numbers are just crazy when you think about you've already traveled 60 feet, and now you're still talking about shaving off that kind of time.
Oh yeah, it's good times, but it's being able to just analyze the car from one end to the other and not just get hung up on specific pieces.
Right.
I mean, you were talking about gear ratio. Sammy's rear gear is a 5-to-1.
Mm-hmm.
You ask anybody on the street, that's the craziest gear they ever heard, but we're overcoming a 154 first gear, because that's what's available in the aftermarket to handle the torque that he's putting out through a converter and not break the bank. So it's constantly you're using your math. It's just, see what you can get away with and moving forward and making educated guesses, and then not being married to the idea you just had, because we got to put our ego in our pocket,
right.
And just give the car what it asked for.
Easy to do after you've done it this many times? Just tuck that away in your pocket?
It's funny. I get hung up all the time where I'll say this engine should be doing this, goddammit,
Right.
But you got to back off and think to yourself, well, maybe the converter's too loose. Well, maybe, and this is real basic stuff, but maybe we've got the wrong gear in the back and we're starting to float the valve springs 200 feet before the finish line, or. And as long as you don't get trapped into that, looking at one component on the car and trying to blame everything on it, you just got to back up and just go from one end to the other and just think about air fuel spark. And all drag racing is trying to turn that tire as fast as you can without losing traction.
Right.
If you break it down that simply, it's not that hard.
Air, fuel, spark, and don't lose grip.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like that. 250 miles an hour, snap of a finger.
Well, it's just the truth. You don't want to lose air, fuel, spark, or grip at 250, just like you don't have a starting line.
I can see the benefits of not doing that.
Manage your wing and all that other kind of stuff.
Right.
Your corner weights and four-link instant center and all those things.
You've blown my mind on some of the things. The amount of math just unto itself, just the amount of math it's phenomenal. I mean, it's more than
anything. You become comfortable with it. I mean, there are people that have day jobs where there's a lot of math involved with their deal, but they're so used to working within those certain numbers that it begins to become a little bit easier, and you're not whipping out the calculator quite as often. Makes you look smarter than you really are, too. It's kind of nice.
It helps. Helps pad that ego. Helps pad that ego, even if you got to put it away sometimes, right?
You do, and racing's hard. I mean, if it wasn't really hard to go faster, like we were talking about picking up that was second, picked up a lot with the Camaro.
Second and a half.
You're going to have bad days, and you can't walk around with your lower lip out. There's going to be testing days that suck, and you're going to break a converter, and you're going to wonder why you ever did it. But it can be pretty rewarding to keep plugging through.
Is it? You ever catch yourself getting into the mindset where the cars have a personality and they start getting human characteristics and they're braking on purpose just to spite you?
They do. I mean, in their own way, they don't think, but each one of these things has little idiosyncrasies. Mm-hmm. For example, I'll get back to the Germanos. They're heading down to a race in Virginia, and we learned something the last time we were trying to run quick, which was in Norwalk, that, the thing just does not want to put its nose down. When the second stage of nitrous hit it, picked the nose back up. So we are going to run a different suspension tune-up that you might not normally run in a car of that weight and wheelbase. Mm-hmm. But the engine sits a little higher, steel roof and quarters, a little bit higher center of gravity. So, it's just percentages. It's like you were saying, it's just the math drives you to a conclusion.
Well, on that note, man, is there anything that we didn't hit on over the course of our conversation? I can't believe that we've sped through about 40 minutes already. And
anytime. There's a ton of stuff, and it's mostly just war stories and things of that nature, and things that I learned from people that are a ton smarter than me, because I was blessed enough to be put in their presence, if you follow where I'm going.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But that's for another day and another time.
Well, we got to make sure that you get out here sometime. Catch a ride out with Jason or with John, and we'll start delving into the war story side of things. I mean, the tech information and the different types of racing that we talked about through the course of our conversation tonight is.
Yeah, I ramble, so whatever.
It's been entertaining. I liked it, and we're gonna be changing gears here in just a second and catching up with Jordan Rutherford out there. He's got his Nova. We'll be talking about his Nova and some of the drag racing he's doing out there.
Can I throw a plug out there just for the heck of it?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
All right. I charge a nominal fee, and it's not crazy, to go out and set teams up. Go out and look at their ignition system, if they have a digital programmable system, a grid, whatever those things might be. Mm-hmm. Then help them to decide what their ultimate performance goal is, and make sure that we don't throw the crank on the track.
Right.
If there's anybody that wants that service, it's available. Let me just give my number. It's 585-261-1011. Very laid back, low pressure. You know what I'm saying? Just let's go fast and not hurt parts. If someone needs that help, I think that the little bit that I charge is a lot cheaper than even 2 pistons.
Right. I mean, by all means. If you on Facebook as well?
Oh yeah, just Patrick Budd.
Look up Pat Budd. He's the guy.
UDD, 2 Ds. We can't get enough.
Look up Patrick. He's going to be able to fix what ails and give you a chance at hitting your performance goals, and might even be the guy that takes you to performance goals you never knew that you could reach.
More than anything, just saving money and frustration and thinking the stuff is junk, and being another person that spreads urban myths about it. Right.
Right on. That's all right. That's the way to do it.
Thank you. It was fun.
Anytime. Open door. I'd love to talk to you again. I mean, the war stories and stuff like you had alluded to, we didn't even get a chance to dive into those with the information that we'd covered.
And there are stories. We'll have fun.
All right. Anytime, man. I appreciate it a ton, Pat. Thank you.
No problem. I'll see you.
There goes Pat Ward, former VP of NSCA, NMCA, worked with Sam Gaudier, worked with local champion in the 470 bracket as well, right here locally. From in Macedon, that was Dan Germano. I blanked on his last name there and had to look that up quick. Now we're going to change gears, and I got to catch up with Jordan and talk. Hopefully he answers the phone at this point, because we're a little bit past our hit point for him. But nonetheless, hopefully everybody's enjoying this. It's a little bit of a new angle for us here at Finger Lakes 1, but it's something that we wanted to explore a little bit. We are going to be every other Thursday for now until people tell us not to do it anymore. And we anticipate having Jason Oldfield here in studio a couple times with us, and John Pelican going to be making the trip in. And, of course, if there's anybody that you want to see on the show, we'll gladly take your suggestions, message us through the Facebook page. We've got Jordan Rutherford here on the line right now. Drop him in. Jordan, you got me? Maybe not. We'll try this one more time. See if we can't get him. I know he was doing some testing down there, and I don't know if he was able to. I misspoke earlier, too, by the way. He's got a Malibu. It's not a Nova. He runs that in Pro Class, and he runs his dragster in Super Pro. He focuses on NHR Division 3. Is this Jordan? Jordan, hey, how are you? Hey, let me put you in. Hang on. I think I might have hung up on him last time. I'm looking at how the phone rig is sitting right now. But we've got Jordan on the phone. Jordan, man, how are you?
Not bad. How are you guys?
I'm doing all right. So this weekend you're down in Kentucky?
No. Last weekend was down in Kentucky. This weekend will just be at our local track.
Okay. So how many more races have you got through the course of the year?
I've really only been racing this last part of the year. I slacked off on my Malibu set pretty much most of the season. Then dug it out, cleaned the carburetor out, went over it, changed oil, the basic stuff. Took it to the track and could run the number, but couldn't cut a light, which is pretty much normally the story of my life.
But if you got a lot of action left this year, or is this going to be one of the last weekends you're out?
Well, we're going to try to race this weekend, but we're only looking to be in the low 50s, so hopefully they still let us pull through and race Saturday night. So we're going to try to race this weekend at Edgewater. We're going to try to hit next weekend track about an hour north of us, Kilcare. They have a $5,000 to win race with a chance to be the last man standing in a separate set of entries if you pay an extra fee to the Ultimate 64, which pays $50,000 to win next year.
Wow.
So we'll try to jump in and be the last man standing in that, get a free ride into the $50,000 to win race. And then that's pretty much probably going to close out our year unless we are talking about trying to make it down to London, Kentucky on November 19th and 20th and hitting a 2-day race down there.
You got a quick turnaround coming out of Topeka, Kansas before you get down to Kentucky.
I know the guys have been pretty on me about, I think every day they ask me, are you still going to Kansas? Are you still going to Kansas? And I'm like, yeah, I'm still going to Kansas. There is a race in Kentucky I would like to be at that weekend, but Kansas will be fun, so I won't pass the Kansas trip up.
I think Kansas is going to be a real good time. I met Jordan through RC racing, through actually RC Demolition Derby, and when I found out that he had a background in drag racing, it was kind of neat to talk a little bit about that. The Malibu that you run in the pro class, you were talking about trying to hit the number. Now, what specifically are you doing? Are you trying to do bracket racing style, or are you trying to dial in a particular timestamp?
We're strictly bracket racing.
Yeah.
I mean, the Malibu is pretty much, I'm not out there. I mean, I like going fast, don't get me wrong. That's all part of it. But the Malibu is by far from the fastest car in the class.
Yeah.
It only runs 740s. I think the fastest pass it's ever made is 720, but it's write the number that you think you're going to run on the window and see if you can hit it.
In terms of the dragster, is that your car as well, or is that owned by somebody else?
No, that's owned by Dave McCready.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has the Orange Nova also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we just picked up a 04 Race Tech, another dragster this past Thursday, which we're currently putting a rear end in it as we stand in the shop right now.
So you're running 4 race cars out of that shop on top of all the compact Mustangs.
This is a different shop about miles down the road, but yeah, we got my Malibu, we have his Nova, we have the black dragster that you've seen me in, and then we just picked up this new Race Tech, and then we have his daughter Allie in a junior dragster that runs 790s. So yeah, we stay busy. It's a full-time job outside of work.
All right, so have you ever taken out the in a match race your Malibu against her dragster?
No.
No.
But
because she might be able to beat you.
It sucks for me to be able to say that her junior dragster is 4/10 off the time my Malibu will run. So that's pretty sad on my part. But no, we haven't match raced them.
Yeah, maybe avoid it, right?
Because if she beats me, I won't live it down. So there's no need even trying.
Yeah, just stay right out of that. Stay right out of that hornet's nest. The Malibu is something that you've built up on your own. Is it something that this is evolved?
I picked it up, I guess, in about November of 13, and it was just sitting in an enclosed trailer. It didn't have, the inside was all just kind of thrown in it. It did have a chromoly cage and a nice 12-bolt with Moser axles and gear and spool and everything in it. That's all it was. It was just a shell roller, but it had never been a race car before. And started out with just a 400 old small block that Dad had tucked away in the shelf that he said he was saving for a rainy day. And I took it, and then I had a set of heads off my derby motor that the valve guides had dropped out of. I took those to the machine shop and I had them fixed and sat them down on it. And when I first went to the track, it ran like 1250s, and I was quarter-mile racing it. Foot brake. I didn't have a trans brake, but I was there and I was having fun, and that's what mattered then. And then later in the year, we were sitting in the garage and told Dad, I said, this thing, it just isn't running right. I don't know what it is. I said, come in here and listen to it. And we listened to it, and I was like, I could never get it to make the noise again. I didn't know what was up.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day, that was on a Friday night, I loaded up Saturday morning. We head to the track. I take off first time pass, and I hit about the 330 mark, and I just watched the oil pressure just plummet to zero. I'm like, oh, geez. So I coast off the track, and I spun the back main bearing and the back rod bearing. So that was when it came back apart, and I made it a 406, and it went back with the same heads, but went with a different cam, different intake. It's on the 85 now. Then went on and made it a pro class car, and put a trans brake in it. And then that's when I started running 740s. I only took it a quarter mile one time, and because I don't like to put the RPMs to it now. And it was a low 11-second car, so
wow.
But all I do is 8-mile race now.
So you took one of your dad's old derby motors out of the mothballs, put demolition derby heads on it. They had the valve guides fall out of it. They were redone, and it come apart. You rebuilt that motor out, another couple changes to it, and now the car's an 11-second in the quarter mile.
That's correct.
I like it. What's your dad say about all this?
The bash rules came out yesterday, and he told me to stick with drag racing.
Yes. George is talking about the Bash for Cash, which is the biggest outdoor demolition derby in the country, and they pay $10,000 to win for the compact division, which is like 4 and 6 cylinder cars. They pay $10,000 to win for the old iron division, which is all the cars that were, when you think of demolition derby, the big boats, the GMs, the full size Buicks, the Chevy wagons, things along those lines, and then they have a new iron class that they have, which is basically all late 90s and early 2000s Crown Victorias, and that pays $11,000 to win. And Jordan's family's been pretty big in demolition derby for a long time, but now with this drag racing bug having bit him and taken a fairly good hold, it's kind of fun to see the evolution as the car started out as just in the 12s, and you were there and you were happy with it and got it down into the 11s, and you're running pretty consistent numbers in the 740s on the 8th mile track. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. I think actually after being in this dragster So I always bottom balled racing the pro class and being in the dragster. The first time when I was making my license passes in it about a month ago, that top bulb come on and I didn't even think about letting the trans brake button off. And then about the time the second bulb lit, I was like, oh shit, I missed that bulb by a mile. And I sat there for, I don't know, like a 1.2 seconds or whatever's in the delay box. And I was like, this is going to be a big change. So coming around to letting off on the top bulb is a whole new ball game for me. It's really thrown a wrench in my game.
What else did you have to change on that to make it, you've talked a lot about the trans brake and how much different that is. Is that the only thing that you had to change in terms of making that a pro class car, or was there more that had to be done?
No, since I put it in the pro class, I mean, technically I could still go run it in bracket 3, but they have a cutoff at 12.0, so it would be too fast. You'd just be letting off of it and coasting the rest of the way. But when I rebuilt the motor is when I decided I was just going to go ahead and bump it up to pro class, because I was pretty much knew going in with the new motor that it was going to be faster than 12.0, so there was no need in trying to slow it down. I mean, who wants to slow a race car down? So we just went ahead and went to bracket 2 or pro class, whatever. You want it, each track calls it different, something different.
Right. Depending on where you are, what the division is. What's your goal?
It was a rude awakening going 740s on a weekend basis and then getting in a dragster going 5.0s. It was that was my jump. There was no in between. It was straight out of a slow car into a fast car, and I thought I was addicted then, and it's a whole new addiction now.
What's the ultimate goal? I mean, what are you hoping to do with the Malibu? Is it going to be a continued evolution? Are you looking to get to a point where you can sell that off and get something that's a little bit closer in terms of performance to the dragster of your own? Are you looking to ride this dragster wave up into higher ranks? What's the goal?
I'd say the goal would be just to become somebody in high money bracket racing, like the Cars $1 Million races this weekend. That's something I would want to pull into that race, and people know who I am, and be known for a competitive bracket racer. I would say my ultimate goal would be to be bracket racing a dragster that's running 450s. But I'm pretty far from that goal right now. I think even next year I'm going to slide a delay box into the Malibu, and I'm going to try to use the slow car as my advantage, dial in, let a dragster spot me 3 seconds. I'm going to be crossing halfway when he leaves, and it's going to be tough on me to judge a car coming on me at 145 miles an hour, but I mean, it's going to be hard for him to judge a car that's only doing 90. So,
well,
but at the end of the day, I just want to just be a competitive bracket racer. I mean, this year it's not been too bad for a short amount of time. The Malibu went out twice, and the second weekend I took it over to Indiana, Brown County, little Nashville area, and there's about 65, 70 pro class cars there. I double entered. I rode both my entries down to 6 cars. I was there with a good friend of mine who made it down to 16, I think, and ended up having to racing. We went there together. That's not how I was hoping to have to. Wasn't wanting to racing until the finals, but he lost on his first entry, came back around. We were hot lapping the cars, and I ended up putting him out. So that part sucked, but I made it to the finals and got in the finals against the Camaro, big tired Camaro, and as the day went on, I noticed the trans had been. I'd come down on the trans brake and I was rolling like into the beam further than where I started out, like when I engaged the trans brake. So I wasn't happy with that. In the finals, I thought I damn near deep staged the car because of how far it rolled when I came onto the trans brake. So when I let off the trans brake, I instantly went red and got runner up, and I brought the car home, took the trans out of it, I'm standing in the shop right now, staring at the trans. When I took it out, the bell housing was cracked. I've ordered an ultra bell for it. The cross member started breaking, and neither cross member put in it. I'm going to end up trying to tie the frame rails together a little bit better over the winter. I want to put some limiting devices in the front end just to make it all stuff, just to make it leave better and handle better on the track. Nothing really to make it any faster. It's for what I got until it gets heads. It's about all it's going to be speed wise.
Right. It's pretty cool. I mean, the goals and where you're looking to go. And I mean, if it wasn't for that cracked bell housing, you think you had a shot at winning that event?
Well, I don't think the cracked bell housing had anything to do with the slippage into the trans rig.
Oh, you don't think
I think
so?
we're going to end up just sliding everything back into the trans, put the new bell housing on it, and turn the pressure up into the trans brake. It's not being a power glide. I just run a turbo 350, so I don't have a band to tighten. So I don't think that had anything in effect of what went in the finals. Yeah, I think I had that, could have won that race in a heartbeat, and I've been in 7 finals, and I have yet to win. That part really bugs me. I haven't got the monkey off my back, and so the pressure was on myself pretty high.
Right.
But it did not help when I parked the car so far into the beams when the trans brake rolled on me.
Sure.
But live and learn and try to take advantage of them this weekend and maybe get my first win and hopefully get this new dragster that I'm standing here looking at down the track. Dave's going to get in it this weekend, and it's a 548 cubic inch big block, alcohol injected. Hoping to run high 470s, low 480s with it, and see where it takes us.
Well, it sounds like you got a busy weekend ahead of you, that's for sure. And you know, you said you just want to be able to pull in the pit sometime and have everybody know who you are. If it doesn't work out in drag racing, at least you've got the RC stuff going for you.
Yeah, that's true. The RC Derby thing really has blown up for us.
Well, I know you got a lot of work to do on the dragster to get ready for this weekend. I mean, tomorrow's coming in a hurry. You know, I appreciate you guys taking some time out and hanging out with us on the first edition of the Final Round podcast here on Finger Lakes One. Always good to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you guys here. It's just about 3 weeks away down in Topeka.
Yes, that'll be awesome. I can't wait to see you guys down there.
Anybody, before we let you go, that you wanted to make mention of that helps keep the car on the track?
I gotta definitely thank McCready's Motorsports, Kevin in the pits. He is everywhere with us in the shop every day after work. Every pass we make at the track, he's standing there, fuel jug in hand, air gauge in the other hand. But definitely the McCready's for setting my butt in one of these dragsters and letting me take off with it. My parents, just for the support, no matter if I was racing mice, they would be there to support it. Other than that, that'd be about it. I would give a shout out to my good buddy Anthony Conley for getting his first win 2 weeks ago, and like to see where he can go with us. He's with us all the time and racing, and hopefully we can do nothing but go up from here.
Well, again, this weekend, wish you the best of luck. Hopefully you can get in your 8th final and finally pull out a win.
That's my goal. I keep saying I want a win sticker. I need a win sticker by the end of the year. So
right.
Hopefully it's on the side of my car come Saturday about midnight.
Awesome. Well, be safe, travel safe, and hope you make it happen, man. I wish you the best.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
We'll catch you later, Jordan.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thanks. There goes Jordan Rutherford racing this weekend, trying to pull down the win. Timed it right. I figured we were getting close on batteries, and there goes the battery chime. You probably heard it because it's kind of loud. I think that's going to do it for this edition of the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast here on Finger Lakes One. First edition. I think it went pretty well. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Folks that are tuning in on demand, they can find out more, fingerlakes1.tv/final round. we'll have more information there not next week. It's going to be 31st Lab next week. In 2 weeks, when we come back, we'll probably have everybody here in studio again and talk a little bit more about racing and trade some more stories, and hopefully we get Jason and John to make the trip in. Jason, of course, tonight couldn't make it after we had set the start date, and it was his birthday. So hopefully he had a happy birthday, enjoyed dinner out with his family. That is going to do it for this edition, the first edition of the Final Round. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us, and we'll be right back here again in a couple weeks to talk more drag racing here on Finger Lakes One. Thanks a lot. This has been the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. We'll see you right back here again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.